In this clip, I'm going to show you how to upload the website files using FTP, which stands for File Transfer Protocol. Most web servers support this, and most, if not all, web hosting providers will provide this ability. I've deleted the files we uploaded using the Select All button and the Delete button at the top, so we have an empty folder to deploy to. Let's go to the home page of the administration console, and let's scroll down to FTP accounts. We need to create an FTP account in order to access that service from a client application on our computer. I'll use my name as the username, and this is formatted like an email address with the domain name we specified when setting up the web hosting account in the previous clip. So the full FTP user account name will be myname@pyshoptesting.com. Then I'll create a new password for this user account, and I need to set the home directory for this user. I want to be able to deploy files to the root of the HTML folder, so I'll remove the subfolders that the interface wants to create. And now let's create the FTP account. Okay, the details are at the bottom here, and we're going to expand this in a minute. But first, let's download a free FTP client tool that we can use to transfer the files from the local computer. I'll open up a new browser tab, and we're going to search for a free tool called FileZilla. Let's choose this, and on the home page, click the download link. There is a pro version available, but the free version has all the features we need for transferring files and managing the file system on the remote web server. I'll speed up the download process, and let's open up the installer. This is just a standard click next installation, so I'll speed this up also. And now the box is selected to start FileZilla, so I'll click Finish, and the application opens on my local computer. The interface might look a little daunting, but it's actually quite simple. At the top is where we enter the information about the remote FTP server, which is our web server, as well as the FTP account username and password, and the port the FTP service is running on. By default, that's port 21, but it doesn't have to be on every web server, so it just depends how the administrator configured the server. On the left side is a view into the local file system on this computer, where FileZilla is running. And on the right will be the view of the file system on the remote FTP server, at least from the folder that our FTP account has access to. So now we need to get the information about the web server to make the connection. Let's go back to the browser and the GoDaddy cPanel. I've still got the FTP accounts page open, and here's the account we just created. I'll click on Configure FTP Client, and that expands to show the FTP information. The username is the one we configured. The server is the domain name of the site that we chose, which is pyshoptesting.com, with the subdomain prefix FTP. Now, because we haven't configured an external DNS server yet to resolve pyshoptesting.com to the IP address of this web server, we can't actually use the domain name yet from the FTP client tool or from the browser to test the site. We won't be configuring DNS until the next module, so I'm going to show you a little workaround for now. After your computer goes out to an external DNS server to find the IP address of a domain name, it keeps a local copy of that mapping. We're going to modify an operating system file to make that mapping known to the computer without having to go to external DNS. We'll undo this later when we configure DNS though. First, we need to get the IP address of this web server on the internet. We can get that from the cPanel homepage. Let's make a note of this IP. Now let's search for Notepad on the local computer. And this is important. You need to right-click on Notepad and open it as an administrator, because we'll be modifying a Windows file. Now let's go to File, Open, and we need to navigate to the C drive, Windows folder, System32, Drivers, etc folder. Let's change the filter here from just text documents to all files. And now let's open the hosts file. It says the file contains the mappings of IP addresses to host names. Let's add a line at the bottom and enter the IP address of our GoDaddy web server and the domain name that we want our computer to resolve to that IP address. Let's add another entry for the FTP subdomain, and that maps to the same IP address. Okay, good. That's all we need for now. Let's save this file and close it. Now let's go back to the browser and make note of these FTP account settings. Let's go back to FileZilla and let's enter this information in the boxes at the top. The host name is ftp.pyshoptesting.com. The username is the one we configured earlier and the password we created, and the port is 21. I'll click Quick Connect, and we get a pop-up that the server's certificate is unknown. This is fine. we haven't configured an SSL certificate that matches the domain name pyshoptesting.com because we haven't purchased and installed one. We can just click OK that we trust the server. And now the pane at the top shows that the connection was successful. And in the pane on the right, we can see a view into the remote web server. There's a folder called pyshoptesting.com, but we're actually inside the public_HTML folder. When we created the FTP user account, the interface created a default folder for us. But remember, we scoped the access for this user account to the root of the HTML folder. So I'll actually select this folder, right-click on it, and delete it because we won't need it. Now let's navigate to the desktop on the local computer here. And I've got a subfolder where I've copied the website files to. When I click on that folder, the files show up in the window pane below. So let's highlight all the files here, and we can include folders, unlike in the cPanel interface in the browser. I'm just going to drag these files onto the window pane that shows the files on the remote web server. I need to agree to trust the server certificate again, so let's check to always trust it. And now the files are getting copied over the internet using the file transfer protocol onto our web server that GoDaddy provides. It says the transfer completed successfully, so let's go back to the browser and open up a new tab. And I'm going to type the domain name that I purchased and we configured in the local hosts file to point to the IP address of the GoDaddy web server. And now pyshoptesting.com resolves to the web server with GoDaddy that's hosting our HTML website. I've used several different web hosting providers over the years, and they've all been very similar in what they allow you to do. So whatever provider you end up choosing, you should be able to perform some administration right within the browser, and you should have the ability to manage your files remotely using an FTP client tool. In the next clip, we'll look at another web hosting provider. It's actually a cloud hosting provider because web hosting is just one aspect of what's available in Microsoft Azure.